This is Eagle 7 video, 90 minutes mathematical. ID on the line, ID is there. We are right there in Paris, behind the scene. Saw you experienced, spoke with people you interacted, heard my editorial there. The world did not end, or the world has not ended since Paris 2024. What did you come away with from Paris 2024 ID? Good morning.
Yeah, first, good morning, Big Shaq. First, I'd like to congratulate those nations that did win medals. Paris 2024 was a very well organized Olympic Games. This was my sixth Olympic Games participating, and Paris, I have to say, was among the best of those. And it was just a very well organized event. Unfortunately, for Nigeria, we came up empty. That wasn't entirely unexpected. Other African countries did well. We saw the emergence of Southern African countries, the sprints. So if you look at the distribution of medals across Africa, West Africa as a whole did not do well. It's not just Nigeria, but all the countries in this region of Africa. Now, having said that, I will say that the expectation is different from Nigeria. The expectation is different for Nigeria. And through a number of factors, we just were not able to get it done. I, I don't even know where to begin, but in addition to doing an honest audit of what happened, a forensic examination, I do think that as a nation, we also need to look forward. We also need to take away some of the positives, although there are very, very few positives. As we prepare for 2028, one has to ask the question, what is the policy? What is the objective? What is the goal? What is the plan to achieve those goals? We are disappointed that we didn't have any medals. But where was the policy framework? What was the target? And then also, where was the pipeline of athletes? I know that there's a structure to today's program, but let me just put out there, for instance, you look at Botswana. Etsile Tobogo was successful in the 200 meters, but he was in that nation's pipeline. He was already the world under 20 champion in the 100 meters, and so on. So for us, who do we have in the pipeline that can graduate that senior level? So there's just a lot to be said. So as we prepare for 2028 and so on, what indication do we have that we are able to succeed? And it starts at the very, very basics, grassroots. At the very minimum, and I don't want to say this sarcastically, but in Tokyo 2020, 2021, 10 Nigerian athletes were unable to participate because Nigerian officials within the sports establishment could not fill out the right paperwork to enable these athletes who did the work, who qualified for the Olympics, who met the Olympic standard, but because of clerical errors, they were unable to compete. At least this time, it wasn't 10, it was one. And I know that we'll get into this discussion, but it is a risky proposition because it means that you can do the work. Means you can qualify for the Olympics, but because officials are unable to fill out paperwork correctly, it is a dream killing proposition, if you will. So let's just start with being able to fill out the paperwork correctly in order to enter our athletes into the Olympic arena. Yeah, Big Show. Let me just end there.
Well, thank you for laying that foundation. And just listening to you, my frustration is deepening. But okay, now everybody was saying that we should start or should have started preparation for Olympics. But you asked a relevant question. What's the policy? Is it that, everything we're doing is going to be towards the Olympics 2020? Or do we just need to go and generally fix our sport so that when 2028 comes, we are ready generally? That the scene of our sport is not just for 2028, but for even now, for tomorrow, for the day after. And as you asked, that pipeline that does not exist, which people should see, there should be evidence, even before you get to the Olympics, that you are going there to win medals. We didn't have such evidence before we got to Paris a few weeks ago. However, our focus be on Paris 2028, or should it just be generally our sports at this point in time?
Being successful in LA 2028, it needs to be the latter. You need to develop sports at the grassroots. 65% of US athletes that won medals came through the US school system. 65%. Another 12% came organically through club sports at the youth levels. So that is already 87% of athletes who won medals that came through the grassroots sports infrastructure. We need that. We cannot expect to develop any sort of a pipeline without putting people inside of the pipeline. And you get the people inside of the pipeline from the grassroots level. We need to have a policy. Government should work with the private sector to develop a policy, but government cannot lead. Reason government cannot lead because government doesn't have that experience in this sports sector. If you look at the English Premier League, it's not driven by government. The International Olympic Committee is not a government. FIFA, UEFA, Champions League is not government yet. Government plays a role in enabling those events to succeed. Without the government of France, the Olympics cannot be staged because you need security, you need infrastructure, you need all of these things that enable the event. So government should get involved, but government will not get involved unless it sees benefit. And for us in Nigeria, we are unable to see that. Sports industry is a $712 billion industry. So if you put that in context, in Nigeria, it would be the fourth largest industry behind oil and natural gas, telecommunication, banking, finance, and capital markets. Sports would be number 4. But we're unable to see or develop that. Yet we're able to develop the oil and natural gas, develop banking and capital markets, develop telecommunications, but we do not develop sports. Same way you get good service from MTN, so all these other ones, and the same way you're able to go to a bank, an ATM, and function, you cannot do the same for sports because that industry has not been developed, nor is there a plan to develop as far as I know. Or if there is a plan, it has not been implemented. And last point on this, all over Paris, you have what you call hospitality houses. So Nike will have a house, Team USA will have a house. This time around, Kenya had a house, Kenya House. Kenya House showcased the investment potential of Kenya, the sporting potential of Kenya, the tourism potential of Kenya. It positioned Kenya as an incubator for technology, research, academia, and development. So anybody going to the Kenya House could see the Kenyan states in play. Meanwhile, Kenyan athletes are doing that thing at the stadium, but they realize that the Olympic Games is not a sporting event. It is a global gathering like the United Nations, if you will. So it just so happens that sports is on the sidelines. It's what brings this gathering together. But Kenya has realized that this is more than just a recreational activity. So the same way they send diplomats to the UN, they also sent diplomats to the Olympics for a completely different reason outside of sport. So just to land this piece of the conversation, the Nigerian state needs to understand, I believe that they do, I hope that they do, they need to understand that things like the Olympics, that these are diplomatic events beyond sports. They need the Ministry of Sport, Ministry of Education, Ministry of External Affairs. You need to put the backing of the Nigerian state behind these events so that at the very least, maybe you come away with no medals, but then you have now secured a $55 billion investment for one heavy company to come and put something somewhere in Benin, somewhere in Abeokuta, somewhere in Calabar. That is a successful Olympic outing. But I'm not sure that we really understand that message.
Well, ID, what you have just done in a few minutes, it gives us a master class in understanding the scope of sports. And something struck me. We're having a conversation now. This is not an interview. We're having a conversation. Something just struck me in what you said. First, 65% of those that represented the most successful country at the Olympics were from the school system. In Nigeria, probably the first step that we need to take is connect the dots between all the relevant agencies to see this bigger vision that you have just so eloquently painted. Ministry of Education should work with the Ministry of Sport for sure if you want to support. In our history, that was it in the past. Most of us that went national team that represented Nigeria, particularly from 1976 and upwards, were students. We are from the school system. But these days, even in Nigeria, you don't even have a mention. You don't see them. They are the least visible in the federations, in the NOC, anywhere. You don't even hear the conversation about it. Most of those that represented Nigeria, even at these Olympics that did well, were from the school system. So once again, just for the next few minutes, help us to identify. You have done, but I want people, but for this to be reinforced, the connecting agencies mentioned diplomacy, the National Institute for International Affairs, that's sports diplomacy. You mentioned tourism. You mentioned, education. Give us this global picture beyond sport itself of all other agencies that should be an integral part of Nigeria's sports policy.
Yeah, Big Shag, you see a country like Egypt and South Africa. So Egypt hosted the 2019 African Cup of Nations. If you looked at the opening ceremonies of the 2019 African Cup of Nations, which I believe was subsequently won by Algeria, Egypt was promoting itself in a way that used soft power diplomacy. It was promoting itself as the go-to destination in Africa to supplant South Africa for major events. Egypt was positioning itself to host an Olympic Games, but not just that, but to host a UEFA Champions League match. So the Egyptian state was using sport as a tool for soft power. We've also seen China do the same thing. Chinese tied the US for the most number of gold medals at the Paris 2024 Olympics. Though the US had more overall medals, China also had 40 golds. China effectively also uses sport, but what they do, they concentrate on sports that they know, they believe fits with their ability to win medals. You will not see China entered in the 10,000 meters, the marathon, and so on. You won't see China entered in the 100 meters because those sports don't lend itself. And you also won't see non-Chinese competing for China because those sports don't lend itself to Chinese success. Rather, they concentrate on things like platform diving, synchronized swimming, gymnastics, weightlifting, those more obscure sports that don't require those short bursts of power, right? And in so doing, in concentrating on those niche sports, it allows China to run up the score on the medal table to remain an athletic power, stay relevant. So tying that into your question about the relevant agencies in Nigeria, it needs to be a state-sponsored program. Ministry of Internal Affairs needs to be involved as well, and especially the Ministry of External Affairs with the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. Why do I say so? Because the who's who are at these events. I don't want to name drop too much, but I was at an event in the hotel sitting right next to Phil Knight, the chairman of Nike. Why am I sitting next to Phil Knight instead of a senior level government official to be sitting next to Phil Knight? It shouldn't be me. See, but are they able to get there? Do they understand enough to get that meeting at that level? So I am here to say that Nigeria did a lot of things right, but I don't feel as if the success reflected the effort that they put in. I also don't feel as if there was that full understanding. We need legislative backing in our policy. That means the House of Reps and the Senate, they need to be on board in crafting a policy that can get to Mr. President's desk for signature and then implementation.
Huh. Well, joining us, I can see, belatedly, but happily, is a great journalist, fantastic sports administrator, and the coordinator of one of the most influential social media platforms we have in Nigeria, Mr. Godwin Enakena. We all know him. And the platform is the Family United by Sports, FUBS, that's what we refer to it. And it comes loaded with information that is being discussed amongst this huge collection of who's who in Nigerian sports. So let me welcome Godwin again. Godwin, good morning. Welcome.
Bishop, good morning. How are you doing?
Good. ID just raised an issue, that I don't know if you know this, but yesterday I got a call from the Senate. ID was raising the issue of government, the National Assembly, coming up with bills and whatever to help guide this development in Nigerian sport. Within the architecture of our sports development. One, they said, was National Sports Commission bill, the revival of the National Sports Commission, that it has actually been signed by the last president on the eve of his departure, that it is there, and that they know it, but nobody is saying anything about it. That is just for implementation, that body should have been revived. The second is that there is a bill also signed
I am flabbergasted, honestly. Bishop, this is what we'll be craving for how many years? Let us have the NIS back. Let me let's the
NSC.
The NSC. But let me shock you. A few days ago on Family United by Sports, no, it was certainly a radio interview with a. And I asked him about the NSC. How come the NSC is not in the front burner anymore? It was dead. That it can't be revived anymore. I said, how? You were one of the proponents of the return of the NSC. How come, this coach showed at this point? He said, Godwin, with the new nomenclature of our minister, who is now the Minister of Sports Development, it means that he said, I can take this up anywhere, that they have clandestinely killed the NSC. So if this revelation from you, thank you, thank God for the Senate member who spoke with you, it just so that someone is hiding something somewhere. So if you have a Minister of Sport Development, not Minister of Youth and Sports Development, then someone is playing with our sport in our country. That's number one. So, of course, I'm going to take this up on all my platforms. I'm going to speak with the minister. I'm going to ask him the question. You have access to the Minister of Sport Development in Nigeria. I have access to it. We're going to be asking him, are you aware that this is what is happening? Number two, we've always talked, Bishek, about a university for sport in our country. What we were told was that it was still in the embryo. But to know from you now, this is a massive revelation that I'm going to take up on FBS later today, that we is actually been not just debating it.
It's been signed into law. It's been signed into law.
And we keep, what I always say about our country, I've said over time that we all know what the challenges are. We also know what the solutions are, but we just refuse to do them. It's just like having a country where you have a Premier League, a professional league of 20 teams, and 18 of them are run by governors. And a lot of us keep supporting it. So in our country, I think the solution we've been looking for is right there in front of us. So it is for you and I, Bishek, and myself, and a lot of others to bring this to the front burner, that all we'll be seeking, we have it right in front of us. But some person definitely they don't want it to happen, and it must happen.
Okay, well, I will just get ID's, opinion about this. What he feels immediately about it. But I have secured the consent of Senator Obinna Ogba. I think that's his full name.
Yes.
Who was, I think, chairman of the Senate Committee on Sports, maybe in the last dispensation of this, to appear on the show next week, Saturday. He has said he would actually come and show us the documents that confirm these my assertions on the show. But let me just briefly take ID's reaction to this great news that the National Sports Commission is supposed to have come back even before now, in the past 1 year. And there's the first University of Sports in Nigeria that should have been on board right now. What are your reaction, ID?
Yeah, it's a big shot. The goals and objectives of this thing would be what? We have to have very clear policy objectives coming out, and we also need to know precisely what are we trying to do? What is the plan of this new body? Is it well funded? How can it attract sponsorship? What are the outcomes that we want from this body? The NSC previously was a very effective organization. Might we be able to bring it back? Or is it one of those things that on paper it exists, but in practice, are we able to reach its full potential? So I am guardedly optimistic. I think having legislative backing to reestablish is always a first good step. But I probably would adopt a wait and see approach to see if these organs will have the teeth needed to be effective, and if so, what sort of enablement do they need to succeed, if you will? Because what we've seen with some of these parastatals is that there's always this clash between the ministry, some of these other agencies, the battle for control, funding, this sort of thing. So if it will be allowed to act independently in the fulfillment of its mission, then I think it is a good first step, yes.
Well, we would have Senator Obinna Ogba on the show next week, and we'll be able to discuss with him. But for now, you raised another issue, which Godwin should just make a contribution to, about either we focus on a few sports, just as the Chinese do. It's not that they don't do all the other sports, but they pay a lot of attention to some of those sports that win them medals. In Nigeria, from our experiences, we have been winning, where we have been winning in sports and so on, and spending so much money everywhere and not getting anything done anywhere. Godwin, do you think we should start to concentrate on a few sports that we know that probably genetically we are inclined to succeed at, even without almost effortlessly. Or we should spread our tentacles to as much as possible to embrace the global sports industry as a whole. What are your thoughts after Paris 2024?
But Big Shek, I mean, you and I know that how many sporting events we compete in? There are very few. We went to Paris. How many sports we compete in? You know, the problem is not the number of sports that we are competing in. It's about the intentionality of wanting to ensure that we go and compete and contend. You see, I don't know what the problem is, honestly. Mary Yanli and all, I like talking to people who have done this business before. Someone like you. You mentioned Senator Obina Ogba. Obina Ogba has been the corridors of sport for like forever. So when he sets up, if a politician, just another politician, talked about the NSC is back and what have you, I would have been having my doubt. The question I ask you, Big Shek, and those listening and watching us right now, what did the government of Nigeria, what did the sports ministry do for Mary, for Chioma Ajunwa, for her to win a good medal at the Olympics? You took her around, you raised money for her, and she won. That's what it is. I'll give you another example. There's a young girl called Wanyo Adekuroye. I can tell you for free how intentionally I set up a wrestling club in the Mountain of Fire Miracles Ministries that produced that young lady. As we speak, she has a younger sister called Mary. You know, Mercy. Mercy Adekuroye, the general overseer of MFM, has been funding their chief outside of this country, paying for their training, paying for their coaches. Do we do this? No. We just wait. When it's time, look at the government of Nigeria, a big country that they say we are the giants of Africa when it comes to sport, waiting until the eve of a major championship like the Olympics to release 12 billion naira. It's a shame. And some people are celebrating that. Who does that?
We speak like this, we are speaking generally. Yeah. I want us to be a little bit more specific. ID said we needed to start to connect with the Ministry of Education. If you are talking grassroots sports and you don't have the Ministry of Education within your structure, then you cannot have grassroots sports, because it is through the school system, the most successful environment in the world, the US, they've developed their sports through an institutionalized process.
Yeah, I probably take a contrarian view to this, because when I see that 10 athletes in Tokyo 2020, 2021, where they qualified for the Olympics, but unfortunately, because we didn't have somebody who could read and write and enter these athletes properly, their Olympic dreams were deferred and dashed. If you are an athlete, competing for Nigeria at this time is a substantial risk. It's a risk. It is a risk, because you know whether or not you will be entered into this thing properly. Look at now, in the history of the U.S., they had never won a gold medal in a medal of any color in women's hammer throw, but Annette Echikunwoke won a silver medal for the U.S. As storied a sports establishment as the U.S. is, it took a Nigerian to go and win a medal in that event for the country. Ironically, she was one of those 10 who were disqualified from Tokyo because Nigerian officials couldn't read and write, put in the paperwork properly. But she went and won a medal for the U.S. and brought glory to that country. My position is this, that this idea of mercenary athletes from Nigeria and Africa representing other countries, is a broader symptom of people, the state, going to other countries. Used to be back in the 60s, 70s, a Nigerian went to UK, US to go and study with the sole intention of coming back home to work and practice. That's it. Now, there is this emigration out of the country. Athletes are no different from other Nigerians who seek to japa, to leave the country to go and try and find greener pastures. Whether they actually find those greener pastures is another story. So the competitor is no different. Think about this. If I'm an athlete, is competing in Nigeria, besides it being a risk, If I go somewhere else, will my allowances be paid on time? Will I have more than one uniform, or will I be on some sort of a social media video washing my uniform at the athletes' village because it's the only uniform I have, right, to compete? In addition, yeah, I also, will my bonuses be there? Will I get the right nutrition, the right physiotherapy, the right sports doctors and medicine that I need? Will these other countries provide that for me? If you look at the shelf life of an athlete, it is very small. It's less than a decade. Actually, it's 4 to 7 years that you can be an elite athlete at that level. So if that's the case, do I want to risk it? We all know that this young chap that plays for Arsenal, I forget his name. He's a
Saka?
Nigerian.
Yeah.
We all know this. Well, your name doesn't change. There's no Nigerian that will not forgive you for going and winning a medal in another country. We all get it. We understand why you're doing it. It doesn't mean you can't come back to your village to Heroes Welcome. We know you're Nigerian. That country you're representing also knows you're Nigerian. You owe it to yourself to do what's in the best interest of yourself and your family. And at this time, I cannot, in good conscience, ask any athletes who has the ability to compete for another country to not take the time to do what's in his or her best interest. It is a decision they have to make. Now, if you want to keep them home, then do the things required to keep them home. You need to have people in administrative roles that can at least enter them into competition successfully. Let's start there. The athlete that leaves Nigeria to compete for another nation, if he's not looking for perfection from the Nigerian state, he's just looking for a sliver of competence. If it was even 10 to 15% better, he would stay. He's not looking for perfection. But in the event that, man, if I compete for Nigeria, my dream will be dashed or altered because somebody couldn't read and write, I have to look at this very, very carefully, being Shet.
We are in trouble. We are in trouble. We are in trouble. How do we start growing the sports industry in Nigeria? There's a lot of talk forever, but the industry has not grown. It appears that we don't even know how to grow it. What do we need to do so that, this overdependence of government will start to recede? You are an expert in this field.
Company has a fiduciary responsibility to its shareholders to turn a profit. If you look at a professional athlete, that athlete has a commercial exploitative value. If the company sees this value, they in turn will drive the sponsorship. If you go to corporate to look for sponsorship, we are not doing pure sponsorship. We are doing grants, not grants. We are doing donations. We are doing philanthropy.
Seed. You are an expert in this field.
Company has a fiduciary responsibility to its shareholders to turn a profit. If you look at a professional athlete, that athlete has a commercial exploitative value. If the company sees this value, they in turn will drive the sponsorship. If you go to corporate to look for sponsorship, we are not doing pure sponsorship. We are doing grants, not grants. We are doing donations. We are doing philanthropy. If you're good and the company sees the benefit and value in sponsoring, they are the ones that will come to you. You won't go to them. They will even be in a bidding war to be able to sponsor Nigerian football or this athlete or that athlete or what have you. Okay, because they can see that through this athlete we can achieve our corporate goals. That is why they sponsor. They sponsor in order to achieve their corporate objectives. That's why they do it. So for us, as a country, let me just back up. The United States does not have a Ministry of Sports. The US does not have a Ministry of Sports. So how is it that the most successful sporting country doesn't even have a government footprint in the sports industry, yet they're the most successful? So it is private sector driven. Government has a role, but government does not lead. They don't have the experience to lead. But by providing an enabling environment, encouragement in the form of grants and other incentives, then you start to develop your sports industry. So it has to be a combination of government and private sector, but the private sector needs to see the ability to commercially exploit the sector in order to reach its objectives. You cannot go to Libra Brothers or Unilever, whatever they're called now, or Guinness, and tell them to give you money. Even if they do, it's a one-time thing. It doesn't move the needle. But if they're a part of the program,
technical issues, but Godwin, you heard ID there, and my eyes were just open to one reality. You know, since last week when I had a conversation with Atai Albert, you know, an expert in the area of digital technology. Can you hear me, Godwin?
I can hear you loud and clear.
And it is clear that for the sports industry
of sport
to be driven by fans, the followers, sports products, either by visitation to the field, by tourism to venues, by consumption of products, by whatever.
Big share, Godegwami. Let me put it this way. I like talking practical, experience like what I have. I'll talk about the project Sporting Lagos that happened to be a football club in Nigeria that was better than 2021. That happened to be the chairman. We were fan eccentric, if you allow me to use that word. That means we realized that football, you can't play football without the fans. So we brought the fans. Every game that we played, the fans were right there. I want to talk about monetizing sport in Nigeria. Big Sheikh, for the first time, I never, no one would have convinced me that a Nigerian will pay more than 200 naira, which is what we pay to watch football. The fans watching Sporting Lagos games paid as much as 500,000 naira. Can you beat that? For a team playing in the second division before we came to the Premier League, 500,000 naira. Fans will troop to that venue. What did we give to them? First and foremost, we showed them that we are a truly professional football club. Number two, we played football that was pleasing to the eyes. Number three, you had the match day, activities that I saw young people, the Gen Zs, leaving the cinemas to come and watch football in Nigeria. I never thought this would happen in my lifetime because what is the secret? You offer them what they wanted. They come and play football. They come and watch football. They are entertained. What they don't see before they are seeing it, there is what security. You can feel it that there's security everywhere. They're happy and they leave. So the minute, like Annie just said now, it is about time that the private sector is allowed to play its role. There are a lot of persons out there who want to invest in Nigerian sport from the private sector, but they are scared. Policy inconsistency, that's number one. Let me give you a quick example. You know that Sporting Lagos, the owner of that club, is a young man who is under 40. He left his comfort zone in America, came to Nigeria to form a football club and started building a stadium by the waters. He built a stadium inside Landmark. Be sure you know Landmark very well. He built a stadium inside Landmark. 95%, the stadium was built. Sporting Lagos was supposed to play Eyimba in their last home game a few weeks ago. Unfortunately, there's what is called the coastal line. That stadium has been demolished. That stadium, billions of naira demolished. The young man is devastated. He doesn't know what to do. He put so much money into that. He had advertised that stadium to his friends in America, all over the world. And unfortunately, this is where. So how do you encourage the private sector? When he built that stadium, it was not part of the Coastal Line project. It was not going to take it. Then we started hearing about realignment. We want to realign it. Is the realignment that Lagos Stadium billion sector. Number two, we did not play it. Sporting Lagos is in the private sector. We have Vanderizer, a private sector team that came to the NNL, even to is going to the NLO. So the minute I have said this before, and I say it everywhere, the minute government takes its look, check, don't argument as refuse to let sport go. The moment the government leaves sport, let the governors forum sit down and say to their members, no governor should get involved in football, running football every day, because government is not, Big Shell, let me finish, because government is not in the business of making profit. Government is the business of providing enabling environment, infrastructure. That's what government does. If government is running football, you can't compare with government clubs who don't make profits, who don't play the game the way it's supposed to be played. How do you expect the private sector to come in? Leventis died. Abiola Babes died. Iwayawu died. Just name them. They all died. So what are we saying? If once government takes its hand off sport and say we will provide this and that, the private sector will come in. I can guarantee you that.
Okay. This is Eagle 7 Sports Radio. Once again, we want to take one or two calls if we can. I don't know if my people are able. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the power of the fans and how we are not utilizing that aspect of it. Without the fans consuming and patronizing sports, industry will not grow. And this issue of government, actually taking off their hands completely in our kind of environment, I don't know. I think it might require forensic examination of some sort. But ID, your thoughts?
Fan engagement is everything. Fan engagement is what brings out the sponsors. Fan engagement is what brings out the big brands. Manchester United signed Odion Ighalo tail end of his career specifically to see if they could drive fan engagement in the Lagos market, already the fourth largest fan base for Man U globally. So brands and sporting teams and organizations are coming up with innovative ways to not just engage fans, but to keep fans. What is the fan experience like? How am I able to now take a fan, somebody who would not be a fan, but attract them to my product? Maybe they're not even football fans, but because of how effective, how pleasing, how aesthetically graceful my product is, maybe I now take somebody who wasn't even had an interest in my club or even the sport, and I bring them in. Once you get the right fan engagement, now brands will take notice. Oh, well, this is the psychographic or the demographic of the type of fan that's attracted to this particular club. And that falls in within this segment of our brand marketing campaign. So it is now more profitable for us to sponsor this club because we have access to these commercially exploitable fans within this demographic. So, yes, fan engagement is absolutely the key to the success of any brand, any sporting club. Number two, as far as government goes, I agree with the Leonard gentleman that, yeah, government cannot lead. They should provide an enabling environment. And unfortunately, government tends to block. Because let's just say that you're having success. Government will now want a piece of that success. To have somebody just throwing up one or two artificial excuses like that to block you because he or she is not part of it. And the reason is they block is because by you being successful in the sporting segment without this person, it makes them look incompetent and they can't have that. So they are now riding on your coattails, your success, to try to make it seem like they're doing what they're supposed to do. Meanwhile, they brought nothing to the table. They brought no innovation, no ideas, nothing. And even when you try to include them, they now said they want to do X, whereas you don't need them to do X. You need them to do Y. But they don't have enough knowledge to know that. So it now becomes an issue of self-preservation for them versus helping you to advance your sporting objectives. So we need to be in a position where if government is not going to help, at least let them not block. Let them not introduce artificial things. By the way, what is our policy on reducing tariffs, import tariffs for sporting equipment that comes into the country? Do we have something that makes it easy for us to import some of these items and so on that we would need? So again, if government's not going to enable, let them also not stand in the way.
There's something that is missing within the ingredients we need to drive marketing. And maybe it's just knowledge. Probably, I don't know. Just your thoughts.
Well, like I said, everything government is free. That is the big problem. But the private sector driven, there's no sense of entitlement. You pay for everything. Let me give you an example. As a chairman of a football club in Nigeria, do you know that if I'm going to bring an extra person to the stadium, I pay for that person to get into the stadium? When Sporting Lagos is playing every weekday or weekend, everyone that gets into that stadium, apart from students, they pay to get into that stadium. And the cheapest ticket is 2,000 naira. Shooting Stars ticket, maybe 200 naira. You say, and even that 200, they will not pay. There's always a sense of entitlement that this is Shooting Stars. It belongs to us. If Sporting Lagos is traveling, the supporters club don't talk to us. We just see them on the road in their caravan, different vehicles. They spend their monies. Our supporters will tell us, I think this player is good. Does the coach want him? Some of our supporters will raise money. So we'll pay the money to bring this quality player to the stadium. Our supporters come, they buy jerseys. I tell you, Big Chef, you'll be shocked. As a chairman of a club in Nigeria, Sporting Lagos, I don't have a jersey. I buy my jersey, 25,000 naira. But I have a chairman like me that has 2,000 jerseys dashed to people for free. It's government money. You see the difference? So monetizing what we're talking about, the fan engagement. I said earlier that I was blown away that our young people now leave the cinemas, the movies to come and watch football. On match day, you need to see the excitement. They see the club as their own. If the club succeeds, they have succeeded. But government is our own. It's not my own. That there's government money. If the team is traveling, the government must pay for them to go. If they are at home, the government must even give them food to come and watch football. I go back to monetizing football, monetizing sport in our country, making a big business. We keep talking about what is big business. What is big? We know what to do. Let's do what is needful. Government is strangulating sport in our country unless they take their hands off. Check, I will shock you.
Well, we must not leave this show on a depressing mood. So let me get ID to fire us some optimism. And let me lay the premise that I want ID to do this for us. See, I believe that the Nigerian fan, the Nigerian football fan, for example, 200, I don't know how the number, 150 million strong Nigerians that passionately love football. And they actually fund European football. Nigerian fans actually fund European football. They are one of the biggest patronizers of all the European leagues and so on and so forth. The fortunes of DSTV, for example, lies in the subscription that football followers in Nigeria pay to that organization. So we have more power, followership of, and maybe even sports beyond that we are not utilizing. I don't know how ID will help us crystallize all of this and deliver that message to Nigerians who appreciate that which we have. Our numbers, our passion for sports, that we haven't converted into something that would form a big part of the transformation of this country. ID, start us on that course, please.
Shaq, I remember as a kid living in Calabar, we used to follow the Rovers. The Rovers used to be our club. We used to own them, everything about them. And we used to look forward to the ICC Shooting Stars and Stationary Stars and Abiola Babes and all these teams coming to Calabar to play the Rovers. It was festive. It was it was a fantastic atmosphere. You have 50 kobo, you can enter the stadium and so on. Or if you're like us, you can make a ruse to be a cleaner to enter the stadium because 50 kobo was beyond your reach back then as a schoolboy. The passion runs deep. Nigerians love sports. Let's give them a reason to be able to sustain that love for sports. It is organic. It cannot be manufactured. The loyalty is there. So let us give them a reason to continue down this path. We say these things and we have these forums because we care, because we do want to see Nigerians succeed locally. It is from that local success that you will now have global success. And we want to see this. So if it comes across as if there is a critical angle to this, it is because there is. Anytime you have passion, you must have an honest assessment of where you are. We cannot fix the problem unless we surface them honestly. And unfortunately, we are judged against a global standard, right? You can't go to the Olympics and begin making excuses. A sample size of 200 million people, but we don't have one person that can run a distance of 200 meters in under 20 seconds. Botswana has 2 million people. So Nigeria has literally 100 times the population of Botswana, yet they have 2 people that can run 200 meters per second. I refuse to believe that we don't have this. I do think that from a grassroots perspective, let's keep the kids interested in sport. Let's pull them away from their phones, their social media. Let's get them on the playgrounds again, like we used to play. Big Shaq. I've always said that if you haven't had the privilege of watching evening football in your village local primary school, you're missing something special. That village on village rivalry and the people that come out, the meaning of such things, and it doesn't get more grassroots than the village. And you can see even the old woman that is selling akara, she will come out there to support the village when they play that evening football. Big Shaq, we have it. We have all the ingredients. We have the passion. Can we exploit it? Can we keep it? I think we can. We have a lot of work to do.
Well, I have only 2 questions to ask. One to Godwin, one for ID to round off today's show. The one for Godwin. The next thing we are going to be doing now, federation election, federation into the different national sports federations. And you know how the situation is before now. The situation is what has brought us to this point where we don't know our responsibilities, we don't know the different rules and regulations, we can't drive the sports at the federation levels, the elections are long and convoluted and expensive and don't represent the fair level playing ground and so on and so forth. You are Minister for Sports of Nigeria. Godwin, you are Minister for Sports. The elections are at hand. Specifically, start to help me think, what should we do now? What should the sports minister do? Elections coming to ensure that at least federations become a part of something positive going forward. I'm talking of the elections now, particularly. And then ID will now come in, and I want you to think about it before it gets to your turn, ID. You are President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. ID, you are President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. What would you do now? What are the steps you would just take immediately? Think about it. But Godwin answered that question. You are the minister, and elections are just down the corner. Over to you.
The first thing is to meet with all the board of the federations, sporting federations, and one by one, I'll ask them questions. First, you've been in office for 4 years, or you've been in office for 6 years or 8 years. What have you done? What is your scorecard? That is the first thing, the question I'm going to ask. when I see I already know, I just ask that question. And if it has shown that you've not been able to impact the sport, I will advise you, the board members, take a decision. Get a leader that can take you to El Dorado. That's where I will start from. I'm not going to impose. I will advise. You've been the president of Handball Federation for 8 years. Fine, you can go ahead. That's where I will start from. Number two, I will create an enabling environment for these sporting federations to thrive. I will ask them what their challenges are that are peculiar to them, and I will deal with it. Number three, I will not interfere in their elections. I will only advise those that can make it happen to do the needful. Doing the needful is either to vote that person out of office and bring in somebody. And of course, I will not lie by saying I will play a clandestine role by ensuring that the best we make at the end of the day, because you are not allowed openly say this is what you're going to do, because every sporting federation has a secretary from the Sports Commission, the Ministry of Sports, have an accountant from the Sports Commission, and sometimes even members of these federations are staff of the Ministry of Sports. So these are the things I'm going to do. First of all, like I said before, I will ensure they have a meeting with all the federation, the boards, different boards. Number two, advise them on what they should do. Number three, find a way of ensuring that the wrong people don't come back to office or even win elections to run the federations.
Well, I buy into that. Your last that last bit. Yeah. That the wrong people don't come back, because if they were right, their sports, of course, will be thriving now. You are President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. You look like him in a way because you are rich. You know, we know how rich people look. ID.
No, when you said you're rich, I mean, you're talking to the wrong guy. So I didn't think
And I'm not talking financially. I'm not talking
you're
financially.
Talking to somebody else. It's not me again. You're addressing. Yeah, Big Shaq. If it's me, if I'm the president, I know that I have a country to run. I know that it's not just sports that I'm responsible for. So I know the weight of the presidency, and that sports is just one of the sectors. But I would declare a national state of emergency in the sporting sector. Number one. Number two, I would task the Ministry of Sports. I would put together an independent panel of inquiry to find out what happened at the previous Olympic Games. Let me give you an example. Champions League final 1999, Manchester United versus Bayern Munich. Bayern Munich leading the match going to the 90th minute, and Manchester United scores 2 goals to snatch Champions League away from Bayern Munich in 1999. The German parliament immediately set up a panel of inquiry to figure out what happened that a German club could collapse such spectacularly on such a big stage at that time. It was important enough to the German state to find out what happened, even though Bayern Munich is a private club. So that type of attention to detail needs to happen, that type of honest assessment. So I've said 2 things now. One, declare a state of emergency in sports. 2, set up a panel of inquiry to find out what happened in Paris at 2024. 3, task the Ministry of Sports with coming up with a sports blueprint within 60 days. 4, task the National Assembly to have a bill on your desk within 90 days. And then 5, come up with a vibrant plan for tourism in the country. Sport tourism is very important. It drives certain sectors of the economy. So those would be the 5 things I would do, and these are things that you could do immediately. Again, not to take away from the fact that you have, when you're the president, you have so many other things. I think we all understand that. But those are 5 things that can happen now in order to begin to have the conversation about sport. And I'll leave you with this one thing. Breakdancing was an Olympic sport in Paris. Yet Nigeria did not have a breakdancing entry. And we all remember how we used to sneak out in the 80s to go and breakdance somewhere where you used to have one kind of cassette that you can use, one 60-minute cassette to rock an entire party. So What I am trying to say is that we do need a situation whereby we can have the right policy in place, we have the ingredients, let us execute efficiently, but with prudence.
On behalf of all of us at 7 Sports Radio, I thank you, Doreen Uyo, from your base in Atlanta. Thank you for staying up this late. Join us in this conversation. Godwin and Nakena, as usual, thank you for all your insights into our domestic sports. I wish both of you the very best of luck. Thank you. Well, that's all we are having this morning. From wherever you are in the world, this is Mr. Mathematical on 90 Minutes Mathematical. Seeing you next week, Saturday.